logging on. Give me a second.
Okay.
Okay, there I am.
Okay, thank you very much. It is 4 o'clock. Let's call the meeting to order, please. Roll call.
Member Martha A. Flores,
Present.
Member Kelly Carrillo,
Present.
Member Maria Venus, Member John Lawless, Member Julia Liu,
Present.
Member Rob Taylor.
Here.
Thank you. Could we have self-introductions from the Porterville Chamber representation?
Dennis Ickes, I'm the chairman of the board.
Christina Clausen, interim CEO.
That's it.
Thank you very much. We will now go into oral communications. This is the opportunity to address the audit committee on any scheduled matter. Unless additional time is authorized by the committee, all commentary should be limited to 3 minutes per individual and no more than 15 minutes total. Do we have any public comments? Do we have any virtual?
No.
Okay, we have
Mayor
no,
Flores, I
please.
have a comment. On the 15,000 that the city puts up for the city Chamber of Commerce to use, I don't feel quarterly is acceptable, because how can they make their plans if they don't know if they're going to have enough money? That's my only concern. And we need a strong Chamber of Commerce in the city of Porterville.
Thank you. And could you, we have your name?
It's
for the rest-
Ray Dean Strong.
Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
We have the one public comment and there are being no other. Okay, we will now go into scheduled matters. The first one to be the approval of the draft minutes of the Internal City Audit Committee meeting of July 26, 2021. Has everyone had time to look at the minutes that were sent out? Do we have a motion then?
So moved.
We have a motion by Julia.
I
Do we
will
have a
second.
Do we have,
I will-
okay, we have a second
will
by
second.
Councilmember Carrillo? No further discussion? Call for vote, please.
Aye. Oh, do we need to roll call, huh?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Member Martha A. Flores,
Aye.
Member Kelly Carrillo,
Aye.
Member Maria Venus, Member John Lawless, Member Julia Liu,
Aye.
and Member Rob Taylor.
I think it's important to note that, thank you, Mr. Taylor, for being here. He is a public member, which was not, because it wasn't yet appointed.
So I can't say aye?
Yes, you
Well,
can.
I'm just saying. for the-
You absolutely can. You're
I
allowed to
didn't
vote.
say that. I
Well,
just,
you
was-
just did.
I
I
wanted
was just
to-
curious about that. I wanted to second that,
wanted
but I
to
wasn't sure
welcome
what would
you as a
happen.
Public member. Gave that opportunity.
Thank you very much. Now we will go into the second item to continue the review of the agreement between the city and the Chamber of Commerce to review and discuss the potential amendments to the agreement between the city and the Porterville Chamber of Commerce. I want to note and simply state that since the last meeting that we had here, the item from the last time that we met was presented as informational only on August the 17th to City Council with a staff report, which is the item that was sent out with the agenda of this council meeting. And this morning at about 10:54, we did receive the changes that were made on behalf of the Porterville Chamber to the city. We, as a city council, did not discuss. It was simply an informational report that was presented to all council members by staff. And with that being said, we will make reference to the draft that was sent out this morning. Okay, and everybody has, does anybody need that copy?
Well, I know that's what Julie
Oh.
is from a Brown Act standpoint, because it needs to be available to the
Yeah,
public.
I have an extra copy. I did make an
Yeah,
extra copy.
There's
Yeah.
extra copies.
So there's an extra, so what with the,
For the public discussion.
yeah, for the edification of the public, there was a new draft that the chamber provided that we only went out this morning. So if you guys would like a copy, we have copies available if you don't already have it. That's what I
Okay,
thought. So I
yes,
think
because
Fernando has them.
I wanted to disclose that because we received it at 10:54 this morning.
Vice Mayor, I just wanted to state that since
We're okay.
I've been at work all day, I saw the email come through from Julia, but I haven't got to print it or review it, the newest one that came out today. So I'll be looking at it on the computer while we're during the meeting.
Okay, I appreciate that because that way you can follow through.
Okay.
As we look at the agreement that was submitted on behalf of the chamber to Porterville, I'm going to reference to legal counsel and go from the changes all the way through page 2. They seem to be acceptable. Did you have any comments on that? Page 1 and then page 2 of 7?
Oh, on the latest?
Yes.
Well, I guess
Or
the question is, did we finish
did we go back to this other one?
the
That's
initial
why,
draft, or what's the best? approach?
Well, so
Well,
the
and
latest
for the-
draft
For the
has
public
both
member,
in there.
maybe we brief for where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, and I will say this, so the version that Alan provided to me, and just so everybody knows, he
Okay.
provided to me last night. I just didn't see it till,
We work late.
yeah, it's okay. I operate at all hours of the day. I just happened not to go on my email last night. So, but any rate, but the red line that is provided, the newest version does have both, it's redlined with both my changes and Alan's, or the his changes on behalf of the chamber. So you can kind of see it. They are a different color, and you can see the comments. So where you see it says AB, that's Alan. Where it says J, that was me. So you can kind of see back and forth in the agreement. And we're getting, there weren't any major. The biggest thing, of course, is the change in the amount, which was inserted, which is, I think, proposed, but that's an amount that's clearly proposed by the chamber to go from 35,000 annually to 45,000. That's the biggest substantive change. I see here that the chamber has actually proposed for equal payments of 12,500 on January 31st, April 30th, July 31st, and October 31st. And then the other area where there were substantial changes by the chamber would be under on page 3 of 7, the subsection, it's section Roman numeral 2-B. They've added additional information here about what the responsibilities of the city would be. And this is more or less consistent with discussions. There might be some wording tweaking that I would maybe propose, maybe so it doesn't simply say the city shall cause the city manager, or for instance, since the chamber is providing for a designee, we should probably allow for that to also be a city designee, just little things like that. Not a major issue that I would have from the legal side. I think we can work out those issues. But we do want to, I think that would be really important for the city to look at that section and make sure that it feels it's comfortable and that's consistent with what we want to be doing. So,
Well, and in some cases, that may need to be reflective of what the city's charter is,
right.
which
Correct.
limits.
Right.
Limits anybody at this table from that. So
Yeah.
Some of those are.
Right.
now, may I comment? May I go ahead and comment? Because at the conclusion of the last meeting that we had here, and we, meaning city and the chamber, had the discussion of the different fiscal years. So those dates needed to be clarified. And then that the chamber would be providing a clarification on a payment schedule, and that the parties discussing the city appoint a liaison, which was from the last meeting,
Right.
which is in the direction that we're going. And I wanted to make that public information. And of course, we did have the discussion at the last meeting to review the terms of the city's annual budget and the adoption process related to the chamber's fiscal year. And a clarification would have needed to have been done.
Yeah, and if you look at page 4, you'll see there's some, that's where you'll see some of those changes implemented. So if you look under both the unilateral termination part and then also under the annual review part, there's language there So I think if I remember correctly, the annual review, most of that language was what I had, and then I think Alan added the month of April in there for when there would be annual review. But we can certainly add more clarification if you think it's needed.
Okay, so that summarizes our last discussion with what I have shared, and that helps to go into the discussion of what was presented from the chamber to us.
Yep.
And it needed to be clarified and it needed to be disclosed, so that way the communication
Right,
can
and
be made.
I will say too, on the termination, if you look at, so it's not a 30 days written notice. They are proposing that be basically like an annual, like if there's gonna be a desire to terminate, that it be done on or before, that there be notice provided on or before May 1st for basically a June 30th termination. So, and I'm sure that the chamber, and I don't want to speak for you guys, but I would imagine that's because you want to be able to plan for the fact that there's not going to be the
Yes.
funding if that's the case.
Exactly. Yep.
So at this point right now, did anyone have any questions before we now really go into the discussion of the changes? Councilmember Carrillo, did you have anything that you wanted to say as we move forward?
Not at this moment until we start going through it.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Taylor, did you have any questions?
Nope.
Thank you very much. All right. Okay, so as we highlighted, the first two pages, page 1 and 2 of 7 are okay. Is that, I'm looking at legal counsel. Okay.
I think so, unless anybody else has any questions.
I
about it.
didn't have any questions. And on page 3 of 7, up until Roman numeral number 2, the city responsibilities. I believe I want to unfold the dialogue as to where the $45,000 comes into discussion here and where this change. When I remembered at the last meeting, we were talking about the $35,000 stipend, and the stipend payment, whether it's a one-time or 4 equal payments based on the 35,000.
Mhm.
Where did the $45,000 come in?
When we were reviewing this, and this was prior to us talking to our board, obviously, so we had to go back to the board and talking amongst the board. Since this agreement has not changed and the dollar amount has not changed in so many years, just reflective of inflation and the cost of employees, the cost of doing business, the cost of everything has gone up since that $35,000 was implemented. What was that, 15 years ago? The costs have gone up for employees and for everything. So we felt that it was necessary in order for us to continue on doing what we have been doing for the city, and reflective of the cost increase, that we would need to increase that amount.
And to add to that, insurance has definitely increased in addition to the other costs.
And that was one of the things in the agreement of the increase to $2 million, which does increase our policy. And that's per, I think, city ordinance or
It's actually pursuant to our RMA's recommendations that we need to go to that.
right,
Yeah.
right. So that does increase our liability insurance as well. So it's just more reflective of the increased cost of doing business since this first agreement was agreed upon and the amount was agreed upon.
Okay, Councilmember Carrillo, did you have a question on that? Not yet?
No, no, not yet. I'm gonna wait.
All right, thank you. Mr. Taylor, did you have any questions?
Just a comment. I think it's pretty,
Comment?
I love it. I think these guys take some guts to do that. It's pretty cool.
Mr. Lawless? No comment? Okay. And I'm gonna come back because I'm only one person.
Mhm.
And this dollar amount of $45,000 to be brought to the audit committee is probably not the negotiating committee for this dollar amount.
Right.
Because as we look at the agreement was for the $35,000, and it's not something that would be dismissed, but it would be something to have to go to full council for that determination. If we are making this investment of either or the 35 or we go with the 45. I know that questions would be, do you have a full body on your board? Have there been any changes? There have probably been changes over the years. And I understand the sensitivity with COVID and the stresses, and we want the chamber to succeed. That's a given. We want the chamber to be successful for the business community and to work with the organizations that provide the benefits for the small business owners. Chamber is a strong conduit because they would be the ones to lobby for the businesses through the legislations for all businesses, regardless of who they are. So if that is a determination, I'm only, like I said, one person, and I'm gonna maybe ask legal counsel, how can this be proposed if the audit committee is not one to say?
Okay, so I'm gonna answer on, I'm gonna answer the legal question, but then I'm also gonna tell you what my opinion is as a board member. Which
Okay,
are kind of
please,
intertwined.
that's.
So, okay, so legally, you're right. I don't know that we aren't, the city council makes a determination on that.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
So, we're not gonna be able to, we wouldn't, and it's a little awkward for us to recommend it since it really is their ultimate decision. So that my thought on this is, I have no problem with the proposal, but it has to stay a proposal on that
Right.
amount because it's up to the, and then it really is up to the council's discretion. So, and I don't even know that it's really up to us to make a recommendation.
No,
Right.
no.
No, and I
On the
understand that.
specific
Yeah.
amount,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, so as long as you guys are good with that.
Yeah.
That's where I'm kind of at with
Well,
it.
the only, how does that add to that?
God,
Is that if there are activities that you're proposing, so the way you describe it is basically the same cost of activities going on. I agree completely. This agreement hasn't been in. I mean, I was asked a question. Mr. Taylor asked me, when was the first agreement between the city and chamber? It was 1958.
Holy cow.
It was $150 a month. So obviously, there's been, and I don't know what I didn't take a chance to see
That was
what
19 you
what
said
the actual, what's the
1958,
real
is that
cost.
what it was?
I don't know, but I don't know what $150 a month in 58 is in 2021 dollars. But that's what it was in 1958. That's as far as that's when we can show was the first agreement between the city and the chamber.
That's amazing.
1958.
It's a
I have
long
copy of it,
commitment.
actually.
Yeah.
So just for curiosity's sake, and then this agreement was last, as we discussed last time, was 2006. And at that time it was 20,000. It was increased to 35,000 in 2006. And certainly the, 3%, you're probably there. I don't know. You probably did
It was like 47 something. Yeah.
So,
Yep.
so we looked at it as well. So I mean, but it becomes that kind of conversation, which I think is kind of what this, what in the agreement, this started with Alan Bailey a year ago, which was in COVID. There were certain activities that were challenging to be able to do, community events and those sorts of things that, so maybe there were elements of this that needed to be revised because they were old, they're not the best way going forward. And I would say that's within that is what are the activities? I mean, that's really the activity here is what are the activities from a community promotion standpoint is being contracted for, and are there changes in or modifications to that? And that was part of the amendment back in 2019, which was, there are certain modifications that were necessary. So I guess that's still that's my only concept to that is that it doesn't necessarily have to be the same old table. It's just what are the different ways to be able to better promote the community. We talk about Mighty 190. That's a new element that we're talking about, but not limited to that.
Right.
Maybe there's other, from a social media standpoint, from I don't know. I'm not a I'm not a community, I'm not a, I don't do social media.
Social media.
I mean, there's a whole skill set that I don't know a lot about that are really good about promotions. So, and I know that was one of the elements that, how can that, that's what the Mighty 190 is about branding and about trying to create in large part, it's going to be a social media, virtual, there'll be some tactile things, like we talk about Caltrans as being supportive. I mean, just use that as an example. There's some tactile elements, but mostly it's virtual.
Mhm.
And how do you brand it? And branding is largely electronic.
Mhm.
Word of mouth, social media.
May I make a comment? The wave of social media for promoting and getting the word out. I remember having had received a letter from the Porterville Chamber from someone in there that indicated that a lot of the promotion with the chamber would be impacted by doubling the amount, but at a lower cost with social media. That is just something I just want to put out there because that was communication that was received, I want to say sometime in 2020. And it was on chamber letterhead. But I'm going to go on a different venue here because anytime there is a dollar amount, whether it's an increase or a decrease, or if it stays the same, it becomes a budget request. It becomes something that would have to be allocated in a budgetary amount. It's just not there. And I'm looking at Ms. Bemis for that part of it, because to look at it on the budgetary aspect when something is presented, because we're not saying it's not going to happen, but it's the portion of the books for clarification.
Well, it's the council's budget.
Yeah,
You-
you can
you-
amend
you
it.
appropriate
Okay,
to-
and that's,
Yeah, we do that regularly.
okay.
Budgetary process. One thing I would suggest is something to document or something to prove what the need is for the increase. That, you know,
Thank you.
And that was kind of what I was saying. That's done one of two ways, either just, how are things modified, or, and I think that's part of how do we continue to promote this community in a changing environment. I appreciate the GAC meetings being electronic as an example. I hope, I don't know if that's I'd like to think that's a positive in terms of access, because people don't have to go to a building and take time to do that. But that's an opinion. If GAC, I used to use that as the most recent example, and it's on here that people to just zoom in, and I would hope more people would attend because of that accessibility. I guess that's the question.
And that's one primary thing I mean, not primary, I shouldn't say that, but that is one aspect that we're trying to promote even more, because honestly, prior to me being the chairman, I never went to those GAC meetings. And then getting on, I felt the obligation to go, and that's one of my best hours of the month that I actually take time out of work to actually listen to, because I get everything that I need in just an hour. That would take me, hours of reading the newspaper every single day and
Same-
current
same for
events.
me.
So we're trying to push that, and we're trying to push, helping businesses come together and lobbying and having a voice more in those meetings, because I don't think that there's enough voices in those meetings to let the government, whether it be federal, state, or city, know what businesses are going through and need to. So yes, that is a push, and it is a very important meeting.
Councilmember Carrillo, did you have any question or
I guess,
comment?
I'm just thinking, as we're talking about this, the amount of money, not that it's a lot or little or anything, just a change in the money amount, the funding amount threw me off because I didn't expect that. So I didn't know how to, how seem appropriate that this is the first time we're hearing it, because I know council would have to approve that. But is that a part of approving, or us as a committee reviewing any contract? Is that ever brought up during this committee that there's a change in a budgetary amount?
I don't think
Is
it's
that
necessarily a problem
something-
for the chamber to propose it. I mean, they've provided a red line, which is just their proposal, and I went ahead and provided it to you. It's their proposal. So it's not, I mean, I don't have a problem with the process. The issue is whether it just becomes an issue as to whether or not the council wants to, what they want to consider. So when we provide it to the council, what I'd recommend is we'll provide it not with just the number not there. And then we can say, but we can make sure for the record that they're aware in the staff report that that is in fact what the chamber's requesting. So, and why. So,
Okay,
and
so
then
that,
the council can make a determination, and chamber gets to come and advocate before the city council about whether or not they'd like to, why they'd like that and what they're gonna do, and you guys can make a decision accordingly.
so that could be part of the process then, is decreasing or increasing a budget amount. And then the second part of what I was gonna state is, because we haven't even got through the agreement yet, in agreement on what should be in there or shouldn't, how is that gonna work with, as we present this back to council? And how will that, so that's
Yeah.
was my only things that I've been
so-
thinking.
Right. So I think the internal audit committee's responsibilities, I think with regard to this agreement, are basically with regard to our fiduciary what we think the city's fiduciary responsibility should be in terms of this agreement. And that's really what we've been talking about. The number is it is a sort of almost a separate discussion, because it truly is a discretionary issue, right? Has nothing to do, what we're looking at, when we were looking at the agreement, is what do we need to, yes, there are some discretionary things there as to what services or what things that the chamber wants put in there. But really what we're looking at is, how do we want to make this a more responsible agreement for both parties, right? So and I think that's what we've been spending the time on. And we certainly can go through if there's things in here. I actually think we're pretty close, like I said, but there may be certain things. If you guys have questions about the termination, if you have questions about when the annual reporting is supposed to happen, if you think there should be something in addition to the annual reporting that's in there, or how you want to, if you think there's more needed on the budgetary process, those were the areas that were left a little bit less clear from the last meeting. We were kind of agreeing that we needed to do something, but we really hadn't gotten there exactly, as far as what. I've tried and Alan has tried, and we've kind of tried to work together, but if you guys have additional suggestions, we should definitely handle that. I think that is something we do want to make sure we get clarified. And at least our committee wants to be comfortable with it. You're absolutely, whatever we are going to do with the council is just going to be a recommendation anyways. So the council will be able to have its input. They have the ultimate say on this, because it ultimately is an agreement signed by the council. We're basically screening and trying to get it, in the best form that we think it needs to be in, addressing the issues that we think mutually need to be addressed between the parties. So.
Did that
that
answer,
helps.
did that help you, Councilmember Carrillo?
Yes.
Thank you very much. All right, then I think that we have had a conversation to item A and how it will be presented to council on the city responsibilities.
Yeah,
That discussion that we.
2A, yes.
Yes, 2A. All right.
Was there any comment on the quarterly? You guys, I mean, we just set those dates as a quarterly payment instead of annual.
Again, I mean, if that's what you guys are proposing.
Yeah, we're just proposing that.
Already quarterly.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah, we didn't change anything.
Well,
Yes,
now
You know
that
what's
was
already
already,
there.
but the discussion now is the
You had a member of the
amount.
public that
Yeah.
raised it though,
Yeah.
so if you
Okay.
guys want to, if you guys want to talk about it, we can. You had a member of the public that did raise that issue.
Well,
so.
right now, so I guess my link, I would say by those dates, because.
By those dates, yeah.
Those dates may, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
might be
I'll say
holidays,
that.
Holidays or.
Right.
Okay.
Weekends. So I would just say right now, it's talking about the first of the month following. I mean, it's kind of it's a weird, basically it's an accountability structure, which is after the report's done, there's this period of time, because we have to do a check request.
Check request, yeah.
So it's, by this, it's more automatic.
Right.
I would just change it to mine.
I have a quick question about that, about this quarterly thing. Seems like when that was implemented, there were times when I think the chamber board felt that the city would was going to withhold their money for one reason or another if they weren't happy about something. Is that, I don't know, is there anything in this agreement that,
Well, this does change it a little bit. If you look, it actually says well, actually, no, we need to look at this because it says however such annual payment. So are we going to make it quarterly and and then provide activity reports? Is that the idea? So we're still going to do the quarterly report, have the chamber do the quarterly report, and
So-
then make the payments following that?
Well, here, so the current agreement, the way it's operating, and so it's an annual amount that has it has a quarterly reporting and it was a cash flow question.
Mhm.
So instead, and remember, we got into this discussion, was it a prepayment or post-payment?
Yeah,
It feels, you're the best you can tell me, it feels like a post-payment.
That's
which is
what it
why
feels
I
like
went to
to us.
cash.
Yeah.
Right, so, but it started, it reads in the.
it really was a prepayment that turned into a post-payment
Right.
due to
Gotcha.
due to the chamber's own activity. I think that it really wasn't, it was intended actually not to be a post-payment from what I could understand.
So what it became is, so it was an
So-
annual payment of 35,000 paid on a quarterly basis, in tangent with, or in conjunction with a quarterly report.
Mhm.
And so in answer to your question, it's an annual agreement that has a quarterly payment to it. Now, if you don't make a quarterly report, the question is, do you get a quarterly payment?
well, that's the
And that was
question,
the
is
late-
if
and
it's
that is
agreed
the-
upon annually, then does that, yeah, is there
Well,
But
any
it's the
recourse for
quarterly
this?
report is based upon, the quarterly disbursement is based on the quarterly.
I think what we talked about at the last meeting, just, and maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, at the one in July, was that that report did not necessarily need to be a in-depth financial
Right.
report, but we did want, but the city council was still probably going to want a activity report on a quarterly basis. And so I think just to know what's,
Mhm.
and basically it's kind of like to check in because there's a plan that's been, the way we're now envisioning this, there's not only going to be, you're going to provide your, annual financial, but you're also then going to be providing a plan for what you're doing
Annual
that
plan,
year.
yep.
And so then those reports are just kind of like a check-in
Mhm.
on that. The question is, do we want to keep it? It is, right now it's still written in there, although I just noticed it does need to be modified. I think the intent was that, because it says such annual payments, but really we're talking about quarterly payments. So it'd be
So it goes back.
such payments shall not be made until the city receives and reviews the annual annual needs to be activity report.
So the intent, the question that you asked is the intent. The intent is that it's an
Yeah.
annual, it's an annual agreement that has quarterly obligations on both sides. And so the answer is, yeah, I would say under the existing agreement, if you don't make a report, you don't get paid. Because
So-
it works both ways.
So suppose there's a report made and there's a council member who doesn't like what the report says. What happens?
There's still a disbursement.
It's still
Yeah.
on unanimous.
I think the idea was that the report needs to be given. It's not that you're graded and and then
Correct.
paid based on your
Yeah, okay,
performance.
because yeah, that happened a couple of times too, where the report maybe wasn't.
Well, I think
quite-
they were withheld when there
done
was no
quite as
report
well
at
as
all
it should have
given.
Well, let's
Yeah.
go all the way back to why this is the case, because we went from this not being an issue of reporting to no reporting.
Yeah,
And then this whole was amended because there wasn't reporting,
yeah.
But
other than once a year.
the quarterly disbursements were actually a chamber idea originally to help. Because we didn't know whether this was a,
That was done at the
a
chamber's
thing.
request,
yeah, just to try to,
Yeah.
help manage the years.
right?
Which really, I don't know, I guess in the end, maybe wasn't the best move, because now you're really under the hot seat. But,
How-
Okay.
How so?
well, I think that, just based on past comments from city council members, that report has been held over the heads of the chamber boards in the hallways, maybe not in public, but listen, I don't like this was a
Yeah.
really crummy report, so because of that, you can get your money. And
That actually
being
never
civil-
happened.
it didn't happen, but sitting on the other
Yeah.
side of the fence at the time, that's a pretty scary thing. And when you're trying to manage something and you don't know where, if you're gonna get that or not, it makes it very hard to manage things, so.
In
That's all.
respect to the members, can I say something?
Please, go ahead.
Sorry, I think there's like a delay, so I didn't mean to interrupt him. I was just gonna say in respect to that, you know, to resolve that, I think it would be fairly easy because we don't want, I don't believe the council would want the chamber, who's very important to a city, to fail or be unsuccessful, but be as successful as we can be together. But to communicate, simple communication of, would you, you know, is this acceptable or is there something more that we could do? And I feel like if we come to that spot where, you know, an update, what type of financials would be sufficient, then let's just go and give those quarterly. Because I wouldn't want to have the criticism going back and forth either. I would want to know that the chamber feels comfortable. This is what they expected. Here's what we're submitting and presenting each quarter. That I feel like that would be pretty easy to resolve and communicate with each other.
And I'm going to chime in and echo the sentiment because it was always communication. It was to pick up the phone and call because we hired two people. That is the city manager and legal counsel. We are not positioned to micromanage an organization. And I will be very forthright. I was in the community and it was a community member that said, oh, that city council, they're just not, you know, with the Porterville Chamber. And I said, probably the information you received is on hearsay. I said, bottom line is it's communication and you've only received a portion of it and not all of it. And let's have a discussion and sit down and have the communication. Bottom line is it always goes back to communication and to work with the person, not communication, because we as council have to make a decision collectively. One person does not give the authorization. It's all of us collectively to discuss all of this publicly. It's very simple. And when sometimes there is questions on behalf that may be a misunderstanding out in the community, you start with Mr. Lawless, and if you feel, he will share it and bring it to us. So again, but I have to echo Councilmember Carrillo's sentiment to that regard. And it is communication because information gets misconstrued. And if you're not talking to me and you're hearing it from someone else, that person may have left out a big portion and interpreted what that person was saying. So again, I want the chamber to be successful. They're a strong conduit to the city. And it is an organization that has to do with partnerships of business and professionals. And they're the advocates. You know, you work together to build a healthy economy and you're going to improve the overall quality of this life in this community. I think we've had a long conversation.
I think I can add to, we can
Please.
clarify the language here so that it's clear, because I think part of the problem too is just it's ambiguous. We can basically put in there that it's when the activity report is received and presented to the council. So it's the presentation of the report that triggers the payment, not this idea that it depends on what's in there.
Correct.
So I think I mean, would that address, I think that kind of, that uncertainty or that sort
Yeah, no,
of
that would be
insecurity
great.
aspect of it, so that it's not so feeling like, oh my gosh, if we don't, you know, they could just discretionarily withhold it. So I think it just, in that way, it's clear that it's the presentation, because that was the issue.
Yeah.
That truly was the issue, right? It wasn't, it was the fact that there was no presentation when it's in our agreement, there was, you know, it said there should be. So I think that we can address it that
And
way.
that's the unfortunate part is that
Yeah.
there was zero information that the way to get it was to say, okay, at least.
Force
once
it and
a
put it
quarter.
in.
Yeah, we
there,
don't want
Previously,
that.
it was almost every meeting and reflective upon just, you know, what you do on a quarterly basis was in every meeting, you know, here's what happened since your last meeting, here's what you should look forward to, and things like that. And I would say, so this is like what I would say from my perspective, from a vital, strong chamber, is that it is more than quarterly. It isn't just, well, we have to do this on a quarterly basis. And I'm not saying every meeting, I mean, if I didn't,
We know.
Well, my last comment then is and I hear what you're saying, everybody's saying, the communication thing is important. You attending city council meetings,
even virtually.
visiting with, the people, and I know you're already starting to do that, people here in City Hall and that kind of thing, and then vice versa, on the city side, instead of just doing this, maybe, hey, you guys, we're not seeing a lot of this, can we help you with something, or even a little more communication on what's going on in the city, and how can you get the chamber to help you? Because we haven't seen that in a long time either. At one time, I know that when the city was recruiting businesses, that the chamber was always a part of that. Now, maybe, somewhere down the line that, there was some trust or confidence that was lost, I'm not sure, but things like that that I think, there's a little tit for tat there. And if that happens, then I think you'll see a really, really great relationship start to reset and to grow into something that we all wish that we could have.
Okay, thank you. So we have that paragraph on city responsibilities, pretty much the clarification.
I'm gonna,
and
yeah,
we'll go- all right.
I'll change that.
Thank you. Then we'll go on to be engaged on a regular basis with the chamber as follows. Number 1, the city shall coordinate with the chamber to provide logistical support, permitting, permissions, and authority concerning chamber activities. I didn't have a problem with that wording, and I don't believe anyone else had.
No, I just kind of say it goes both ways.
Okay,
So oftentimes it's, oh, we're doing this in timely.
okay,
Is there a
I
way to
get it.
say
Thank you.
Well, and so let me.
timely?
Okay,
And not.
Not
Because
last,
this goes
not
back
last
to-
minute.
This
Yeah,
goes
yeah, yeah.
back to charter stuff, staff doesn't have the authority to close streets.
Yeah.
But for emergency circumstances.
Right.
which are-
okay.
So-
I'll add,
only
you know what
the
I'm gonna
city
do?
can-
I'll add a similar clause if it's not already here under the chamber responsibilities, right? So it's kind of a mutual
Well, it works both
responsibility.
ways. I
Yeah.
mean, absolutely, there needs to be coordination.
Thank
Those
you.
sorts of things, like I said, whether it's use
Kind
of
of,
city property,
yeah.
whether it's closing streets, I mean, all of those things require city council approval by charter.
So a chamber party is not emergency. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
And yeah, I don't want to get, but
Understood.
the police chief doesn't want to be put in that.
Yeah,
position.
Correct.
Or fire chief.
A mutual for both city and the chamber.
Yeah.
Okay. I agree. Thank you for clarifying. Thank you, Mr. Lawless. All right, then we go into number 2. I have a problem with the wording. Where it's the city representative shall provide status reports to the chamber and attend regularly scheduled GAC meetings. I would like to see something that, if that is a chamber request, that it doesn't, that it would have to be, if it's not going to be the city manager, that he designates the person to attend the meeting.
Well, it just says city representative.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we could put in, city does a designate, I don't know.
City
I'll
manager
find it again.
designee or
Yeah.
something like that.
City manager's designee shall provide status report.
Well, I don't.
No.
No?
No.
You don't want
no,
to designate?
So just to be candid, it's a little awkward. I like doing that. I've always been a part of GAC as best I can. Last year was difficult because we were doing city manager. I told you,
Mhm.
we were
I
doing,
remember.
the county was giving a briefing to us every noon on
Every Thursday,
Thursdays
yeah.
is what was going on. And so it interfered with that. So that's why you saw a lot of Jason. I wish I could duplicate.
I'll just put a
myself.
city designee.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you have Supervisor Townsend providing a report, who's an elected official. You don't have a county, so just, I have a healthy respect for those in office. So just, it's kind of awkward in that regard, so.
I'll just put designee and we can figure it out on our side.
Well, I don't want to limit
City
it just being the
designee.
city manager, that it
Yeah.
may be a member of council that wishes to do that.
That's great.
I'm assuming they're all notified of that availability. And the only concern I have on my side is that we don't have more than 2 of them that
Right.
show up to that. But,
Okay.
but I think I would be happy to defer to a member. That's why I was actually
This
not
is
bad
why-
in that it was a city representative, because then it could be
Yeah, actually,
any from an
we could
elected
just leave
official
it.
to me, to Jason.
Anybody,
Just somebody from the city. I think that was
Come
what you
full
were trying
circle.
to get.
let's just leave it.
Yes, because those reports from the city are very useful.
Yes.
That might be one, John, where we want to consider adding that onto the list of committees or something and seeing if somebody wants. Do we already do that? Is that a council?
It hasn't
So we
been
could,
done on.
you guys could, the council could
Well,
designate
we've
someone
talked
for
about
that.
having a designated liaison.
Yeah. So that maybe that's something the city can do.
Come up with-
Yeah.
Okay,
I think that's important as well. I mean, that's there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of value.
A lot of
A
value.
lot of value.
all right. Number 3, the city shall cause the city manager to meet personally.
So, okay, so I got a couple change. I would say the city shall designate staff person to meet.
I don't mind. I mean, I've always said I'm available, so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
You can, so that you can do it if you want to. I mean, we can make it
well,
broader
I
and you can
just
do
don't
it.
know,
Or do you want to do it?
I don't.
You good with it? We could just say the city manager will do it if you want to do it. Or designee. How about that?
Yes,
City manager or designee. That way, if you're not
designate, because
available
If you're not available,
for
Maybe
some
it should- Maybe it
reason.
should be the chamber should meet personally with a city designee.
Well, it's either way, because it's city, and I think it really, what
It's
we're
your
trying to get
contract.
to is city and chamber designees
Right.
Yeah.
meet
yeah.
personally. And personally, I mean, as long as we're reading personally broadly to mean that if they needed to Zoom or something, they
Yeah.
can do that. Okay. So not physical meeting.
I think what the intent here is just to have
It's
a monthly
nice.
coordination.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's-
Yeah.
exactly.
So I,
So then we don't have any of those surprises that you were talking about.
And I did add, so I think you had mentioned you were concerned maybe not having sort of a situation where somebody's acting, this is not intended to mean that they can act with, where there's an approval needed before the city council.
Right.
So we could clarify that so that it's clear that if we're talking about action to promote business development or procedures for that action, so we can put something in for that, to that effect, so. Yep. No, or no. I don't mind.
So years ago, I just would operate, the chamber would reach out to myself, and we would honestly, like, they have my cell phone number, and the ability to contact, and we would connect.
I can't hear.
basis as needed.
Oh, she
Oh.
can't hear you.
Kelly can't hear you.
So prior to changes that occurred at the chamber years ago, prior to changes that occurred at the chamber years ago, the chamber used to reach out on a very frequent basis, and we would have conversations. So I'm open to that as well, as to continue that relationship of just calling me up. It doesn't need to be a designated time, I would say, on my behalf, but oftentimes there was a lot more coordination that went forth just as from that relationship of just picking up the phone and having conversations about the community, about things that are upcoming as well. So that was organically handled prior to recent time.
And we could even put on at least a monthly basis if you guys want.
I
Sure.
think the purpose of this is to avoid a similar situation. I mean, I'm happy where I'm at. I'm not planning on leaving, but if something happens, the next person in this position should know who to go to, should have a plan. We should be able to look at this and have all those questions answered. And that's really the purpose.
Councilmember Carrillo, did you have any comment on that?
I just like the idea that what's going on is we're trying to just establish regular communication. I appreciate that.
Okay, then we go into 4. List a member of city staff to serve on the chamber ambassador program.
typically, I know
We
for
have.
a long time. This is just, and COVID has interrupted a lot of stuff, but have had a city representative. And that has been a number of folks that have served on that.
Yes, and the reason we brought that up as well is just to make sure we have that established, that it doesn't get lost. In a situation like right now, where during COVID, our ambassador program fell apart, I'm in the process of rebuilding that. So I'm looking back at records, trying to pull people for the new ambassador program. So this is just to ensure that we have someone from city staff involved.
And I want to thank you for your comment, because having served on chambers, plural, the conduit to any chamber are your ambassadors, because they're the volunteers from the community in the business community. They help with membership campaigns, especially to recruit the membership, and they act as public relations and liaisons to the community. So that they help with the promotion of the chamber at all your events. And if you have the working ambassadors that show up to help and assist along with your board, you would be very strong with the rebuilding of that component. So,
I agree.
okay. That's good. Now we say number 3, the term is okay. We go into the unilateral termination, Roman numeral number 4. And we were going to fix. That's why I'm looking at the side. It says fix on the side.
That's Alan.
I'm
That's
sorry.
Alan's comment, so I'm not.
That's what caught my attention. Okay.
So it's like an annual, instead of functioning as a rolling 30-day agreement, it functions as a.
Yeah.
And like you said, it was mainly just for planning purposes for us.
Okay,
I don't necessarily have a problem with that.
okay.
But I'll defer to other opinions from the committee members.
I don't have a problem with that. Councilman McCurley, did you have a problem with that? On the unilateral termination, are you okay with that?
She mouthed it. I'm okay with
I
that.
saw,
Yeah.
I could
Thumbs
read your
up.
lips. All right.
Blink once for.
I'm sorry, you guys. I'm trying to go from the screen to the document to use the little button. So sorry, I left it on. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, and then the annual review, that one will be reviewed annually in April. You're okay with that? You're good with that?
That's their proposed, the April is the chamber's proposed.
Okay.
Month.
I
that's-
think that was based off of what we discussed last
I
time.
think you're right.
With your fiscal year end, and we wanted to make sure that it gave you ample time.
That was the discussion at the last meeting, was that clarification. So that is what we're proposing. And then 6, the amendments, we're good with that. The insurance requirements, number 7.
I will point one thing out before we
please.
jump, just to make sure everybody sees it. Just because I want to make sure we're reading everything in conjunction with what else is in the agreement. So if you go look at page 3 of 7 on the top, that subsection E.
Oh,
So I just want to, so we'll be doing there'll be an annual review of the contract in April concerning the increase or decrease in the amount of consideration included. And that, blah, 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 subject to budgetary restrictions. But then keep in mind though, that you're actually going to be requiring the annual financial report at a month later. So
Okay.
is everybody okay with that? I mean, it's just, I don't know if that makes a difference if the council would rather have that information, the annual financial
Oh.
information first before it reviews in April. We put April in because of the budgetary issue, but we may actually want to make it the same. I mean, I don't know.
Make it
Do we
the
want to make it
same
the
as-
same? Might make it more simplified, and that way you're looking at all, that way the city council has all of the information before looking at the agreement.
This goes to because your year ends in October, so how quickly is
Yeah.
your financial report?
I was gonna say, I don't think it means 30 days after the report. It's after we have prepared our financial report, because we have a different fiscal year.
right.
So our fiscal year doesn't end until October 31st.
Right, but
So-
in the agreement, your guys, right now as proposed, you guys are providing your annual financial activity reports on May 15th.
On May 15th, yeah.
When you're having an April review of. that's the
Right.
concept you're talking
What I'm
about.
thinking is, and actually, when based on what you guys are telling me, I think you'd want it moved out later, as much as late as you can, but still meet our budget. That's kind of what I think
Well,
is the
this
issue,
same
right?
question. So you have an October, this is the choppiness,
Yeah.
where you have fiscal years that are
not
not.
working
not-
together.
Yeah, so so you finish your fiscal year on October 31st. How soon do you prepare your annual financial report?
I would say within 60 days. I don't think that it takes any longer than that.
So ideally, what it would do is that would, so your prior year, so you're in October 31st, that's 60 days later, so let's say you're 1st of January, but that report is already subject to review as part of the April.
And it's actually, it says here that we're gonna,
How you could, given the different, I mean, they're off by 5 months.
yeah, because we actually furnish it to you within 30 days of actually, of it being prepared. So I don't think that's on a date. So if we're doing it by January 1st, you would get it well in advance of the April date anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So it might be old
Oh,
information.
so, but that's not in here though, does it say, where does it say that you guys providing it 30 days? in
The very end
advance?
of that
The
paragraph.
last sentence.
Oh.
That's what I was focused.
Oh,
on.
got you.
Yeah.
Okay, also, I see what you're saying.
So it would be given prior to that
But
date.
this is really I mean, how do you, I was looking at the 1958 agreement. And literally, it says in here that, that there will be this is what it says. Shall quarterly, this is what's funny, at 58, they were saying the same thing. So that the chamber shall quarterly furnish and deliver to first party, the city, an itemized statement of the form and manner in which said monthly contribution has been used and employed by the city. So they're saying on a quarterly basis, you're going to provide a financial report to say, if we received 100, we now have received $450, this is how this money has been spent.
Mhm.
That's what they were saying in 1950. So really the question I think is what is it that the council wishes to have in that report? Because the annual report is showing all your activities.
Right.
And, so the way that the agreement reads, it's speaking to all your activities and or is it how the city's $35,000 or $45,000 has been expended and consistent with a plan that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, I still think though, you're gonna want to tie that, you're not gonna want to do that in April. Because this is now happening before we get their plan for the following year. I mean, don't you want, I would
They
think
might
we would want,
coincide
I
them
would think the
together.
council would want that information at the same time while it's reviewing the agreement. Otherwise, you're reviewing the agreement you're deciding what you're going to do with regard to the amount in the agreement prior to getting the information that they have that regarding the plan. See what I'm saying?
You're renewing the contract prior to
Prior
us
to the
actually
plan.
giving you the
Now,
plan.
we can do that. I just don't know if that's what we're wanting to do. I just want to point out the difference. If you guys are good with it, I'm good with it, but I just want to point out the difference.
Councilmember Carrillo, do you have any comment to that regard?
I think the only hard thing is the hardest part is the timeline for the chamber, and I would have to defer to city staff and finance on that piece for the financials. But as far as the reports, I would rather have them at the same time. However,
Well, and it
we
gives the
could
chamber an
coordinate
additional
that.
month to come up with, to flesh out the plan too. That's why I was thinking maybe it makes sense to make those coincide. So we just do a May date
Instead of
for
April,
both the chamber, the agreement review and the review of the activity and the activities and everything else. Because we were already requiring, they were going to do it May
You
15th
were
of
gonna
each
do
year.
it on May the 15th, and you would have both of them done instead
If
of
that's enough
having
time
one.
for the budget.
well, that was why we were,
That's
so
why-
the conversation last meeting was about, because, we propose a budget the first meeting in June.
Right.
So, and typically the council does its goal setting or priority projects in the March, April timeframe. That's why we were saying in April that there would be this review of whatever the work plan is that we're agreeable to for a matter of budgetary
Okay.
consideration.
Why don't we make it May 1st for both?
Okay.
Just recognizing the annual report is gonna be from the prior year.
It was already going to be though.
No, I know. That's what
Yeah.
I just said. So
Yeah.
it almost doesn't matter who's expecting what on that, as
Right.
part of that report. This is not new, this is not a new.
April?
You want to keep it in April?
You
Okay.
want- Okay.
If you want to change both to April then?
April
Yes.
15th, that's
Yes,
a date
yes.
everybody can
Okay,
remember.
because, all right.
Tax day.
That's beautiful.
Already for April the 15th on this one.
And we're make it both.
Thank you.
All right,
So we've got April.
I feel better now, and I'm actually good with the rest of the language in there.
All right.
You got a meeting?
You
Okay.
foresee any other? I'm just what's my job here?
Public-
You're just the public-
Comment to bring
I'm
the
the public guy.
information.
Okay, so I'm as a public guy, I want to ask a public question. I was a little confused on the way this all ended up, and I don't want to go back over it. But is there any danger of a rogue council person looking at this at some point and saying, what the hell is this? And raising a question that could come back and cause all of us to sit down and do this again.
Well, let me put it this way. I think it's in a better place than it was, the agreement as it was written for that. There's only so much you can do. I mean, we are never able to predetermine what a future council will do. So we're, you know,
This one makes a little more sense than what we were doing.
yeah, I think
So-
we've added clarification, which is helpful to avoid those kinds of things, but you know, I think what ends up happening, I think if that's where we're at, then I think you know, when I'm drafting these things, I would rather see them, rather than trying to get creative with the actual language. I want to leave that, I'd rather have it be written well enough that then it's like, well, then we need to reconsider whether we want to do it at all, in which case then we're in the termination provisions, which are in here, and provide for a year's notice, right? So I think, you know, that's the best we can, I mean, I wish I could tell you, I mean, a lawyer's never going to tell you that, oh yeah, no problem. This is airtight. There's not going to be anything here that somebody
Well-
can just, you know, try to exploit, but I
That question goes both ways. That could be a
Yeah.
chamber board member as well.
works both ways.
Chamber
Yeah.
board president can say, I don't like it. This is gonna change.
But that's why-
Or we're gonna read this sentence this way, I think is what you're getting at, where it's like, oh, you know, what's in here that we can, you know, but I think this is much better than what we have before.
And that's why the annual is nice instead of the every 30 days, because then you're always on pins and needles. So
Right.
Yeah, I know that.
You know,
Every 30 days.
and I'm gonna
At
make
30
this
termination
comment.
for termination clause, yeah.
It was time for the city to review all contracts and all agreements. And this is not the only one, there'll be others that are
We got
coming
a
to the
whole-
table. So
whole-
I'm saying that we're going through each
Slide.
one and being proactive to bring them and to update them. And we get to engage and understand each other with some of the things that are being presented here. All right, then we have come to the conclusion on or before April for the annual review. Number 6, the amendment on page 407. We're good with that. I didn't see, now let's go into 7 with the insurance requirements. I don't see any comment on that.
No, I think we talked about that at the last
Yes.
meeting.
Yep.
And I'm on page 5 of 7.
And actually, this is nothing new. This was in via an
Correct.
amendment to the contract already. Just the only thing that changed was the increase in the limit
Yep.
due to our risk
Okay.
management.
Number 9, the assignment. Number 10,
This is definitely one that doesn't get assigned anyway.
the notices. And then 11, the relationship of parties. All the signature lines will be changed accordingly. On page 667, and I think we made a good stride in having the communication, and you will be making the changes.
I will.
And will be sent out again, and the question that I have, with those changes be presented again to council.
And then we can provide it to the council for consideration and approval. And the
So-
chamber can do the same with its board.
Should, just for, this can be done, and just just similar to the last, should I provide to the council for its meeting next Tuesday, just an informational report with regard? Because
Yeah.
it's Tuesday.
Here we go
Thursday.
again.
I know
No,
it's-
this is what I'm-
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Should-
I might be able to get the changes done tomorrow in time to get it on.
Well, I don't want
Like for a report.
No.
expectations on anybody, but
Yeah.
from a public disclosure standpoint, should we, what the chamber submitted for consideration be as an informational report
Let's do this.
So
Let's
the-
do a real, I would suggest doing a brief informational report to the council. It doesn't have to have the actual adjusted contract on yet. And then that way that gives both parties, like us, time to get the language fine tuned between, I think Alan and I can work on it pursuant to what was said today. This is much clearer direction even than last time, and we didn't even have that much difference of
Right.
opinion from the last meeting. So I think that we can probably get that tweaked enough and get it finalized, and then would you prefer that the chamber consider it first to make sure you guys make sure that your board is good with it, and then we can take it to the
I was
council?
just suggesting, is there any kind of public disclosure? Because we do a reporting of all of the standing bodies under the AB 1, 2, 3, 4, but sometimes we do that as a report. Just as we did last meeting.
Right.
The draft that had been.
We can do it as a report, but I don't think we need the draft on again unless it's up to the committee. If you really want the draft on for reporting, I mean, they're gonna consider it anyway. The council's gonna consider it anyways, right? So,
Well, then I won't, if there's not gonna be, if this draft we just went through isn't gonna be on there, then I would just do it as an.
AB
Yeah.
1234 report,
Yeah.
okay,
yeah, we can
That's
do it
what
as
I
AB
was just asking.
1234. I see what you're
All right.
saying. Yeah, gotcha.
okay,
I understand what you're saying.
all right. I wanna say thank you. I believe we made some momentum and some moves and some strides to see where this now is almost to the stage of finalizing and having the discussion at council and go with that. Are there any other matters that we need to bring to the table? Councilmember Carrillo.
I just wanted to thank the committee for all the work on this item, and also the chamber representatives that are in attendance. Wanted to thank you for your work on this and your comments and questions to try to get this resolved and move forward. And honestly, I really look forward to working closer with the chamber as we come out of this pandemic, move through it, and then eventually come out of it together. So build our city stronger as a team. I'd like to see that.
Thank you.
Chamber, did you have
Yeah,
any
I mean,
comment?
Julia, and you and Alan did a really good job here.
Oh, thank you.
You guys are good. Remember the first discussion and.
It's only as good as
come
what
a
is
long
brought
ways.
to us to put in it. Thank you.
And you two are the perfect two to do that. And yeah, I think here we are in our fourth reset in 6 or 7 years here, but I feel really good about Tatiana here. Chris,
Well, I
I mean
want to
Christine,
thank.
but she was a
Yeah.
fierce basketball player back in the day. She played ball with my daughter. So
Oh, that's good. That's
And,
good.
of course, we know how smart Dennis is, but anyway, so yeah,
It had to be
I've got nothing
Menachie
but
High
optimism.
School. It had to be
Of
Menachie
course.
High School, of course.
Of course. Nothing but optimism here. I think these guys are gonna we're gonna see some good stuff.
And again, I want to say thank you, and I always appreciate when members of the public attend, please.
Can I just have a couple of minutes with my observations?
Uh,
Just to-
There's nothing under oral communication, but you may go ahead and briefly comment. I'll give you
Okay.
that window.
All right, thank you. Ratings strong again. I've been a citizen of Porterville all my life. I'm 75 years old. And I've been to the chamber meetings when they discussed with your chamber representative or CEO. And the one that really upset me was when the city council took the first K-Jug concert away from the Chamber of Commerce and the way they did that. She went to city council presenting what she needed. And instead of offering assistance only, they took the whole event away from her. Another thing on the increase in the funding, in 1958, they got $1,800 per year to operate on. They increased, it was increased in 2006 to 35,000. That's 15 years ago. My price of buying groceries in the last 6 months has skyrocketed, and I'm sure their costs are skyrocketing over the 15 years, comparatively speaking. So I can see where they need more money. The city needs more money. Could you operate on what you operated on 15 years ago? No, I don't think so. I mean, I love the Chamber of Commerce. I want it to succeed. I want the city council to do an excellent job, of course. I support them too. but they do need help. And it just seems and they can't operate on a quarterly funding, because if they want to plan something and don't know if they have the money, and then if the city council decides to take the money away and no, you can't have it because of some report from prior activities they submitted, that's just not right. Either you give them the money or you don't. You know, they're not children, they're adults. And they're an organization within the city that's trying to promote the city. So I just know my observation from the city council meeting and from these meetings is the city council wants to control the Chamber of Commerce in every way, and that's not right. They are separate from the city.
Take care of everything.
That's my only comment.
Well, thank you very much. And like I said, there wasn't a window for oral communication, but the window to
Thank you.
listen is
Thank
good.
you.
And now, with that being said, I know that under other matters, we probably want to,
Figure out another meeting.
enough, but that would be, okay. I'm looking at September the 28th, Tuesday, the 28th. And that would be a meeting with,
Likely
I'm
you're
sorry.
going to have had time to look at revisions.
okay,
What day are we looking at? I'm sorry.
the 28th. That's the last Tuesday.
Oh, let's see.
Is that right?
Oh.
Yes, I have Exeter.
About the 29th. That's a Wednesday. That's not good for you.
You know what? Actually, if we do early enough on the 28th, I could do it. It's better for me than the 29th, actually.
And Councilmember Corilla's schedule, we've been trying to work with.
Oh, sorry.
Is
The
the 28th good for you, Councilmember Carrillo? But how
At
early?
what
did
time?
you-
I can do it. I just have a meeting usually. My meeting starts at 6:30, but they're still doing Zoom, so it's not hard for me to. So I could do a I can still do a 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Could we, yeah, a 4 o'clock would be fine.
I can even do earlier if you need to. I don't have, I mean, I'm just,
The two openings I would say for me would be anywhere around of noonish time, 1:11, so I could call that a lunch break, or the 4 o'clock, I could pull
works
that
for me
off as well.
Okay, 4 o'clock on the 28th.
sure.
You want to make sooner than that, or?
Is that with us or this is internally
No,
with you
this
guys?
is just us.
Okay,
You're always welcome to come. It's a
Ah.
public meeting.
good. I
On
appreciate
to the
offer,
next.
though.
September
28th at 4.
28th at 4 PM.
Yes.
Yeah, I can make that work. I will make it work.
And we would be adding anything else on?
Well,
September
just
the
know I'm
28th?
continuing to have, just for the committees, I was talking with Maria about this. So the state controllers, state auditor's office, controller's office, which does the fiscal health analysis. I'm trying to remember which office. So audit, I'm pretty sure it's a state. Well, who's been auditing Lindsay? That's Lindsay.
State controller.
City of
it's
Lindsay's
the
been
state
under audit.
controller. Yeah.
So I think it's state auditor's office. Anyway, they do an annual kind of health of cities stuff, and Lindsay's
Off the
been-
list.
They're off the list, but there's actually some lessons from that, and this gets to what we've been talking about. So from the city's standpoint, and one of them's a real easy fix, which is OPEB, doing some type of OPEB. I would say there's two deficiencies for the city portal. One is
Okay.
it's OPEB.
What is that? I'm sorry. I need.
Other post-employment benefits, trust account. So what they really want you to do is set up a trust account with a certain amount of money in it so that there's an assurance that when these costs are realized at a later date, that there's
This is
funds. that are set
retirement.
aside. Other than right, which we have a very, you have to do the reporting on a regular basis. I just bring this up because I think it's a good, I mean, the purpose of this committee is to look at what are some of the from an internal.
Okay.
So there's two, which is, so everybody's struggling with one, which is what is your pension obligation funding, right? Because everybody's got a huge unrealized number. So everyone's struggling with that. And that's where the pension obligation bonds
Right.
and that sort of things coming up, which has its deficiencies. But then secondly is the OPEB. And I think that that may be one that we want to have a conversation
Just have
about,
a conversation.
which is OPEB, which is not pensions. This is because we have a limited, I would say, limited exposure to retirees because they move off our retirement plan once they're Medicare eligible. Our exposure is not significant. So, but it's one we could easily address. But what I'd suggest a recommendation from the Internal Audit Committee to the council as part of to establish a trust account, which means you're going to set a certain funds aside just as like I said, it's a trust account for future expenses that are unrealized.
Okay,
And it's ceremonial.
all right.
But it's funny when you look at how the scale is done of financial health. It's like, oh, so if you just put 200,000 into this trust account, all of a sudden you go from, oh, that's awful to, oh, okay, you're great.
Okay, thank you very much. That's something we look forward to then. It is 5:14, no further discussion, communications. The meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting will be September the 28th. Thank you.